Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Foundation Cracks. Marcus Fields adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror of his downtown law office, the same routine he'd followed for 15 years. At 42, he maintained the disciplined appearance that had served him well as a corporate attorney. Sharp suits, precise grooming, and eyes that missed nothing. The reflection staring back revealed a man who'd built his life on careful planning and measured decisions. His secretary knocked softly. "Mr. Fields? Your 3 p.m. is here. Send them in, Dina." As Dina Wilson ushered in his client, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Megan. "Dad, can we talk tonight? It's important." 23 years old and fresh from law school herself, Megan had always been the bright spot in his otherwise structured world. After his divorce from Joan Simon 2 years ago, his relationship with Megan had become even more precious. Joan had taken half his assets, but she couldn't take the bond he'd forged with their daughter through midnight study sessions, weekend hiking trips, and countless conversations about justice and integrity. The divorce hadn't been particularly acrimonious. Joan simply claimed they'd grown apart after 21 years of marriage. Marcus suspected there was more to it, but he'd chosen the high road, ensuring Megan's needs were prioritized throughout the proceedings. That evening, Marcus prepared dinner in his minimalist downtown apartment. The space reflected his new reality, functional, clean, but lacking the warmth of the family home Joan had kept. When Megan arrived, her usual bright energy seemed subdued. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you." She sat across from him at the small dining table, fidgeting with her engagement ring, a modest band that Luke Herman had presented 6 months ago. Marcus approved of Luke, a steady accountant from a good family who clearly adored Megan. "I'm listening, sweetheart. Mom's been seeing someone. Shane McCarthy. They've been together for about 8 months now." Megan's words came out in a rush. He's really great, Dad. He makes her happy in a way I haven't seen in years." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though something cold settled in his stomach. 8 months meant Joan had been with this Shane person well before their divorce was finalized. Still, he maintained his composure. "I'm glad your mother has found happiness," he said carefully. "There's more." Megan took a deep breath. "Luke and I want to move the wedding up. We were thinking October instead of next spring. And Dad, Shane has been so wonderful to our family. He's helped Mom through the divorce, been there for all of us. I was wondering." She paused, clearly struggling. Marcus waited, sensing the direction this was heading. "Would you be okay if Shane walked me down the aisle alongside you? I know it's unconventional, but he's become such an important part of our lives." The request hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he'd spent decades in courtrooms controlling his reactions. He reached across and squeezed his daughter's hand. "Megan, this is your wedding. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy." The words felt like glass in his throat, but he meant them. "I want your day to be perfect." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you for understanding, Dad. I knew you would." After Megan left, Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and sat in his leather chair, staring out at the city lights. Something about this situation felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Joan had never been one for quick rebounds, and the timeline of this relationship troubled him. He opened his laptop and did what any good attorney would do: research. Shane McCarthy wasn't hard to find on social media, and what Marcus discovered was interesting. 45 years old, charming smile, pictures from expensive restaurants and vacation destinations. No obvious employment, but clearly not struggling financially. Marcus had built his career on trusting his instincts, and every instinct screamed that Shane McCarthy was too good to be true. But he was also a father who just promised to support his daughter's happiness, regardless of the cost to his pride. He closed the laptop and finished his whiskey. Tomorrow he'd focus on wedding preparations and being the supportive father Megan needed. But Marcus Fields hadn't become one of the city's most successful attorneys by ignoring red flags. Some investigations, he decided, were worth pursuing quietly. Chapter 2. The Charming Stranger. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself face-to-face with Shane McCarthy at Megan's engagement party. Joan had rented the ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, an expense that Marcus wondered about, given that she'd claimed financial strain during their divorce proceedings. Shane was exactly what Marcus had expected. Perfectly groomed, expensively dressed, and possessing the kind of effortless charm that made people gravitate toward him. He was tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of a man who'd never met a room he couldn't command. Marcus, the famous attorney I've heard so much about. Shane's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. I want to thank you for being so gracious about the wedding arrangements. Not every man would be so understanding. Megan's happiness is my priority, Marcus replied evenly, studying Shane's face for any tells. In his experience, con men always revealed themselves if you watched carefully enough. She's an incredible young woman. Joan's done an amazing job raising her. The subtle dig wasn't lost on Marcus. The implication that Joan had been the primary parent. We both contributed to who Megan became, Marcus said mildly. Throughout the evening, Marcus observed Shane working the room. He had stories for every group, business ventures in California, a yacht he'd sold last year, connections with influential people. Yet when pressed for specifics, Shane deflected with humor or changed the subject. Marcus noted that Shane paid for everything in cash. The bar tab, tips to the wait staff, even a generous donation to the country club's charity auction. For someone between jobs, as Joan had mentioned, Shane seemed remarkably liquid. He's wonderful, isn't he? Joan appeared beside Marcus during a quiet moment. His ex-wife looked younger than her 41 years, wearing a dress that Marcus suspected cost more than most people's monthly salary. He certainly makes an impression, Marcus replied diplomatically. Marcus, I know this is awkward, but I want you to know that Shane has been incredibly supportive about maintaining your relationship with Megan. He actually encouraged me to make sure you were included in all the wedding planning. This surprised Marcus. In his experience, when a new partner encouraged maintaining ties with an ex, it usually meant they were either exceptionally secure or exceptionally manipulative. That's generous of him. Joan touched his arm, a gesture that once would have been intimate but now felt calculated. I'm sorry about how things ended between us, Marcus. We were both so focused on our careers that we forgot to focus on each other. But Shane, he reminds me that life should be about more than just work and responsibility. As if summoned, Shane appeared with 3 champagne flutes. Talking about me, I hope. His laugh was hearty, infectious. Marcus, Joan tells me you're quite the legal eagle. Corporate law, right? I dabbled in business acquisitions myself before I decided to take early retirement. What kind of business? Marcus asked. Oh, a little of everything. Import-export, real estate development, some tech investments that worked out well. I was fortunate to cash out at the right time. Shane's answer was smooth but vague. The conversation was interrupted when Megan approached, practically glowing with happiness. Dad, isn't this wonderful? Everyone's here, everything's perfect. She hugged him tightly. And having Shane here just makes it feel like a real family celebration. Marcus felt something twist his chest, but smiled warmly. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Luke's a lucky man. As the evening wound down, Marcus helped with cleanup, while Shane regaled a group of Joan's friends with a story about deep-sea fishing in the Bahamas. Marcus couldn't help but notice how Shane's stories always featured expensive activities, but never specific details about how he afforded them. In the parking lot, Marcus overheard Shane on his phone. No, the timeline needs to move faster. October might be too late. Yes, I understand the risks, but the opportunity won't wait forever. Shane noticed Marcus nearby and quickly ended the call. Business never sleeps, right, Marcus? I thought you were retired. Semi-retired. Some consulting work, nothing too demanding. Shane's smile never wavered, but Marcus caught something in his eyes. A calculation, a measurement. Driving home, Marcus replayed the evening in his mind. Shane McCarthy was smooth, charming, and financially comfortable. He made Joan happy and had won over Megan completely. By every reasonable measure, Marcus should have been grateful that his family was in good hands. Instead, every instinct told him that Shane McCarthy was a predator and his family was the prey. The next morning, Marcus called his private investigator, Phil Zamora, a former police detective who'd helped with several difficult cases over the years. Phil, I need you to run a background check on someone. Quietly and thoroughly. What am I looking for? Marcus stared out his office window at the morning traffic. I'm not sure yet, but I want to know everything about Shane McCarthy, his past, his finances, his real story. Something doesn't add up. How deep do you want me to go? As deep as necessary. And Phil? Time might be a factor. The wedding's in 6 weeks. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. Marcus threw himself into work while Phil conducted his investigation, but concentration proved difficult. During client meetings, he found his mind wandering to Shane's 2 perfect answers and Joan's sudden financial flexibility. Something was building toward a conclusion he couldn't yet see, but his attorney's instincts told him to prepare for the worst. 2 weeks before the wedding, Phil called with preliminary findings. They met at a quiet diner downtown, away from Marcus's office. Your instincts were right, Phil said without preamble, sliding a manila folder across the table. Shane McCarthy is not who he claims to be. Marcus opened the folder to find photographs, credit reports, and legal documents. The picture that emerged made his blood run cold. His real name is Shane Patrick McCarthy, and he's got a history that reads like a playbook for sophisticated con artists. 3 marriages in the past 15 years, all to financially comfortable women. Each marriage lasted between 2 and 4 years, and each ended with Shane walking away significantly wealthier. How wealthier? First wife, Patricia McCarthy. She was a successful real estate agent in Phoenix. After their divorce, she lost her house, her business, and had to file for bankruptcy. Claimed Shane had convinced her to make a series of investments that went bad, but by the time she realized what happened, the money was gone, and so was he. Marcus felt sick. The others. Wife number 2 was Dr. Lisa McCarthy, a pediatrician in Denver. Similar pattern, lavish lifestyle, expensive gifts, talk of business opportunities. She ended up losing her medical practice when she couldn't pay the loan Shane had convinced her to take out. The third wife, Sandra McCarthy, was a widow in Seattle with a substantial life insurance settlement. After 18 months of marriage, she was left with nothing but debt. Criminal charges? Phil shook his head grimly. That's the beauty of his method. Everything was technically legal. Joint accounts, signed documents, legitimate investments that just happened to fail. He's careful never to cross the line into outright fraud. The women always participate willingly in their own financial destruction. Marcus studied Shane's photograph, the same charming smile he'd seen at the engagement party. What's his pattern? He targets women going through transitions, divorce, death of a spouse, career changes. Women who are emotionally vulnerable but financially stable. He sweeps them off their feet, moves fast to establish trust and intimacy, then slowly begins the process of asset extraction. By the time they realize what's happening, he's gone. And Joan fits the profile perfectly, Marcus said quietly. Recently divorced, financially comfortable from the settlement, emotionally vulnerable. Plus, she's got a daughter getting married. Shane probably sees that as a built-in timeline to accelerate the relationship. Marcus closed the folder, his mind racing. What about the timeline? Joan said they've been together 8 months, but I traced his arrival in the city to about 10 months ago, which means he was likely already targeting your ex-wife before your divorce was finalized. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Shane hadn't just stumbled into Joan's life. He deliberately inserted himself into a vulnerable situation, possibly even contributing to the dissolution of Marcus's marriage. There's more, Phil continued. I tracked his financial activity. He's been burning through money faster than usual this time. Expensive restaurants, country club fees, jewelry purchases. I think Joan might be his biggest target yet, but I also think he's getting desperate. His last score in Seattle didn't go as planned. Sandra McCarthy's family caught on and froze assets before he could clean her out completely. Marcus absorbed this information, so he needs this to work, and he needed to work fast. October wedding, quick marriage, access to joint accounts. Your daughter's wedding might just be Shane's timeline for completing his con. The waitress refilled their coffee cups, and Marcus used the interruption to process everything. His ex-wife was being systematically deceived by a professional predator who had destroyed multiple families. Worse, Megan was unknowingly participating by giving Shane a place of honor at her wedding. Phil, I need you to keep digging. Financial records, previous aliases, any criminal associates. And I need documentation, photographs, bank records, anything that proves his pattern of behavior. What are you planning? Marcus met Phil's eyes. I'm going to stop him, but I need to do it in a way that protects Megan and exposes Shane for what he really is. Be careful, Marcus. Men like Shane are dangerous when cornered. He's invested too much time and effort in Joan to walk away quietly. Over the next few days, Marcus struggled with how to proceed. Simply telling Joan the truth wouldn't work. She was too emotionally invested, and Shane was too skilled at manipulation. Telling Megan would devastate her and potentially destroy their relationship if she chose not to believe him. But the wedding was approaching, and with it, Shane's ultimate goal. Legal access to Joan's assets through marriage. Marcus realized he needed more than just evidence. He needed a way to expose Shane publicly and irrefutably in a manner that would protect his family from the emotional and financial fallout. The answer came to him during a late night in his office, reviewing the case files Phil had compiled. Shane's entire method depended on maintaining his carefully constructed persona. Strip away the charm and the lies, and he was just another predator who had destroyed innocent families. Marcus began to formulate a plan. Risky, complex, but with the potential to end Shane's career permanently while protecting the people Marcus loved most. He picked up his phone and called Phil. I need you to reach out to Shane's previous victims. I want to know if any of them would be willing to help bring him down. Chapter 4. Building the Case. The next week unfolded like a carefully orchestrated legal strategy, which in many ways it was. Marcus had spent his career building cases against corporate criminals, and Shane McCarthy was just another variety of white-collar predator. Phil's contacts with Shane's previous victims proved crucial. Patricia from Phoenix was initially reluctant to get involved, but when Phil explained that another woman was currently being targeted, she agreed to provide detailed financial records and documentation of Shane's methods. He made me feel like I was the most beautiful, intelligent woman he'd ever met, Patricia told Marcus during a video call. Every decision felt like it was mine, but somehow I kept signing papers that put my assets at risk. When I finally realized what was happening, he'd already transferred most of my money to accounts I couldn't access. Dr. Lisa McCarthy was more direct. Shane McCarthy destroyed my life. If there's a way to stop him from doing it to someone else, I'm in. The third victim, Sandra, was the most valuable witness. Her late husband had been a forensic accountant, and she'd inherited his meticulous record-keeping habits. I documented everything, she told Marcus. Every conversation, every transaction, every promise. When my family started asking questions about Shane's background, I began keeping copies of all our financial documents. Armed with this evidence, Marcus began constructing what would essentially be a criminal case without the criminal charges. The pattern was clear. Shane targeted vulnerable women, gained their trust, convinced them to make increasingly risky financial decisions, then disappeared when the money was gone. But Marcus needed more than just evidence of Shane's past crimes. He needed to catch Shane in the act with Joan. Working with Phil, Marcus began discreet surveillance of Shane's activities. What they discovered was both disturbing and useful. Shane had already convinced Joan to refinance her house. The family home Marcus had signed over to her during their divorce. The equity from that refinancing had gone into a joint investment account that Shane managed. She's already in too deep, Phil reported during one of their evening meetings. I tracked the joint account. Shane's been moving money around, creating the appearance of successful investments while actually transferring funds to accounts under his control. Marcus felt a familiar rage building, not just at Shane's deception, but at his own helplessness to protect Joan despite their divorce. She might no longer be his wife, but she was still Megan's mother, and watching her being systematically destroyed was unbearable. How long before she realizes what's happening? Based on his previous pattern, not until it's too late. He'll wait until after the wedding, after he has legal standing as her husband, then accelerate the asset transfer. By the time Joan understands what's happened, Shane will be gone, and she'll be financially ruined. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected call from Luke Herman, his future son-in-law. Mr. Fields? I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. Marcus invited Luke to his apartment, curious about what had prompted the call. It's about Shane. Luke began hesitantly. I've been trying to get to know him better, since he's going to be part of the family, but there's something that doesn't feel right. What do you mean? I'm an accountant, so maybe I notice financial details more than most people, but Shane's spending doesn't match his story. He claims to be semi-retired from successful business ventures, but when I try to get specifics, he changes the subject. Marcus remained neutral. What kind of specifics? Company names, investment types, even basic business terminology. It's like he's learned enough jargon to sound convincing, but he doesn't actually understand how business works. And the cash spending. Luke shook his head. No legitimate businessman deals exclusively in cash the way Shane does. Here was the opening Marcus had been waiting for. Luke, what I'm about to tell you stays between us until I say otherwise. Can I trust you with that? Luke nodded seriously. Marcus laid out everything Phil had discovered. Shane's real identity, his pattern of targeting vulnerable women, the evidence of systematic financial manipulation. Luke's expression grew increasingly grim as the full scope of Shane's deception became clear. We have to tell Megan, Luke said immediately. No, Marcus said firmly. Not yet. Megan won't believe us. She's too emotionally invested in this perfect family image. And even if she did believe us, confronting Shane now would just force him to disappear before we can expose him properly. So what do? Marcus pulled out the folder of evidence Phil had compiled. We're going to catch Shane in the act, in front of witnesses, in a way that makes denial impossible. And we're going to do it at your wedding. Luke looked confused. Ow! Shane's entire con depends on maintaining his false identity. But what if on the day he thinks he's achieved his ultimate victory, we reveal exactly who he really is? Marcus opened the folder and spread out photographs of Shane's previous victims. I've been in contact with Patricia, Lisa, and Sandra. They're all willing to attend your wedding as surprise guests. You want to ambush Shane at our wedding? I want to expose Shane at your wedding in front of everyone who matters to Joan and Megan. Public humiliation is the one thing Shane can't recover from. It's the end of his career as a con artist. Luke was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What do you need from me? Help with the logistics. And Luke, when this goes down, I need you to support Megan through the fallout. This is going to devastate her, at least initially. Of course. But Mr. Fields, are you sure this is the right way? What if it ruins the wedding entirely? Marcus looked at the evidence spread across his coffee table. The documentation of Shane's systematic destruction of 3 families, and the evidence that Joan was well on her way to becoming victim number 4. Luke, Shane McCarthy has destroyed every family he's touched. He's already started destroying Joan financially, and by extension, he's affecting Megan's future inheritance and security. This wedding isn't just a celebration, it's Shane's endgame. Marcus leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of his courtroom experience. Sometimes, to save the people you love, you have to be willing to be the bad guy. And if that means disrupting one day to protect the rest of their lives, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. Chapter 5. The Perfect Trap. With Luke's reluctant cooperation, Marcus began the delicate work of orchestrating Shane's downfall. The plan required precise timing and careful manipulation of circumstances, qualities Marcus had honed through years of complex litigation. The first challenge was getting Shane's previous victims to the wedding without raising suspicion. Patricia flew in from Phoenix under the pretext of visiting friends in the city. Dr. Lisa McCarthy registered at a downtown hotel, claiming she was attending a medical conference. Sandra proved to be the most valuable ally. As a recent widow, she had flexibility to travel, and her forensic accounting background made her an expert at documenting financial crimes. I've been waiting 3 years for a chance to see Shane get what he deserves, Sandra told Marcus during their planning meeting. When he left me with nothing, my family thought I was just a foolish old woman who'd been taken in by a smooth talker. They blamed me for trusting him. Marcus understood that pain. The victims of sophisticated cons often face judgment from people who couldn't understand how someone intelligent could be so thoroughly deceived. The second phase involved creating documentation that would be impossible for Shane to deny. Working with Sandra's expertise, Marcus compiled a comprehensive dossier. Bank records showing Shane's pattern of asset extraction, photographs documenting his presence in each city where he'd operated, and testimony from his victims detailing his methods. But the centerpiece of Marcus's plan was something more dramatic, a video compilation that told Shane's story through the voices of the women he destroyed. Patricia, Lisa, and Sandra each recorded detailed statements describing how Shane had entered their lives, gained their trust, and systematically robbed them of their financial security. The goal, Marcus explained to Phil during one of their final planning sessions, is to create a moment of truth that Shane can't talk his way out of. His entire method depends on maintaining his false persona, but when confronted with undeniable evidence from multiple victims, that persona collapses. Phil was skeptical. "You're taking a huge risk, Marcus. If this goes wrong, you could lose your relationship with Megan permanently. If I do nothing, Megan loses her mother's financial security and potentially her trust in family relationships entirely. Shane's not just stealing money. He's destroying the foundation of trust that healthy relationships are built on." The week before the wedding, Marcus noticed changes in Joan's behavior that confirmed his worst fears. She seemed anxious, distracted, and when Megan mentioned concerns about wedding expenses, Joan quickly reassured her that Shane was handling the financial arrangements. During the final dress fitting, Marcus overheard Joan on the phone. "Shane, I don't understand why we need to transfer the investment account again. Yes, I trust you, but my attorney said, no, of course I won't involve Marcus. This is our business." That conversation sealed Marcus's resolve. Shane was accelerating his timeline, moving Joan's assets more aggressively as the wedding approached. After the ceremony, when Shane had legal standing as Joan's husband, the remaining assets would disappear within months. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus played his first card. He arranged for Sandra to accidentally encounter Shane at the country club while he was meeting with Joan about final arrangements. Phil positioned himself to observe and record the interaction. According to his report, Shane's reaction was immediate and telling. Momentary recognition followed by panic, then quick recovery. Shane handled it well, Phil admitted. He introduced Sandra to Joan as an old friend from Seattle, explained her presence as a coincidence. "But I got it on video. That moment when he first saw her, when his mask slipped. You can see the fear in his eyes." "Good. That means he knows we're onto him, but he's trapped by his own timeline. The wedding is too close. Joan's too financially committed. He can't back out now without losing everything he's worked for." Marcus spent the final 48 hours before the wedding in a state of controlled tension. Every detail had to be perfect. Patricia and Lisa were positioned as wedding crashers who would arrive during the reception. Sandra was already established as Shane's old friend, and Luke was prepared to support Megan when the truth came out. The night before the wedding, Marcus sat in his apartment reviewing the plan one final time. Tomorrow, he would either save his family from financial ruin or destroy his relationship with his daughter forever. His phone rang, Megan calling for one of their traditional pre-event conversations. "Dad, I just want to thank you again for being so gracious about everything. I know having Shane walk me down the aisle wasn't easy to accept." Marcus felt his heart break a little. "Megan, you know I'd do anything to see you happy. I do know that. And Dad, I want you to know that even though Shane is becoming part of our family, you'll always be my hero. You taught me about integrity, about standing up for what's right, about protecting the people you love. Those lessons will never change." After hanging up, Marcus stared at the dossier of evidence spread across his dining room table. Tomorrow, he would put those very lessons to the ultimate test. The gift box sat on his kitchen counter, an elegant presentation containing a tablet loaded with the video testimonies of Shane's victims, along with copies of all the financial documents proving his systematic fraud. It was the kind of evidence that would end Shane's career as a con artist permanently. Marcus had spent weeks perfecting the timing. The moment would come after Shane walked Megan down the aisle, after he'd basked in the acceptance and trust of Joan's family and friends, after he felt completely secure in his victory. That's when Marcus would hand Luke the gift box, knowing that any groom who truly loved his bride would want to know the truth about the man who had just given her away. The trap was set. Tomorrow, Shane McCarthy would finally face the consequences of his carefully constructed lies. Chapter 6. The Wedding Day. Marcus woke before dawn on the wedding day, his mind immediately sharp and focused. He'd barely slept, but adrenaline and purpose had replaced exhaustion. Today would determine whether his carefully constructed plan would save his family or destroy his relationship with them forever. The morning proceeded according to the usual wedding day chaos. Marcus picked up his tuxedo, stopped by the florist to confirm his boutonniere, and made final preparations at his apartment. The gift box sat prominently on his kitchen counter. Elegant silver wrapping, perfect bow, and a card addressed to Luke and Megan in Marcus's careful handwriting. Inside was the tablet containing video testimonies from Patricia, Lisa, and Sandra, along with printed copies of Shane's financial records and documentation of his systematic fraud. It was enough evidence to end Shane's career permanently and potentially land him in prison if prosecutors could make charges stick. Phil called with final updates. Patricia and Lisa are in position at the reception venue. They'll enter during the cocktail hour after the ceremony. Sandra is already inside the church with Joan's family friends. Shane couldn't object without raising suspicions. What about Shane's behavior? Nervous, but trying to hide it. I watched him this morning. He's going through the motions, but he keeps checking his phone and looking around like he expects trouble. He knows we're on to him, but he's too committed to back out now. The wedding represents the completion of his con. After today, he'll have legal access to Joan's remaining assets. At the church, Marcus arrived early to observe the pre-ceremony dynamics. Shane was indeed nervous, despite his attempts to maintain his usual charming demeanor. He stayed close to Joan, touching her arm frequently in a gesture that looked protective but struck Marcus as possessive. Megan was radiant in her wedding dress, surrounded by bridesmaids and caught up in the excitement of her day. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. In a few hours, he would shatter this perfect moment forever. But the alternative was watching Shane destroy his family financially and emotionally. Luke found Marcus in the vestibule. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Look at him," Marcus said, nodding toward Shane, who was now greeting guests with practiced ease. "He's playing his role perfectly. Charming, generous, the ideal stepfather figure. But those people he's greeting don't know he's already stolen Joan's house equity and moved it to accounts she can't access. What if Megan never forgives you?" Marcus had wrestled with this possibility for weeks. "Then I'll have lost my daughter's love to protect her inheritance and her mother's future. It's a price I'm prepared to pay." The ceremony began with traditional elegance. Marcus watched from the front row as the wedding party processed down the aisle. When the music changed for the bridal march, his heart clenched. Megan appeared at the back of the church, absolutely beautiful, flanked by Shane and Joan. The symbolism was clear. Shane was presenting himself as the male head of Megan's family, with Joan's blessing and participation. Marcus stood with the other guests, watching his daughter walk toward her future while the man destroying her family's financial security basked in the honor she'd bestowed upon him. Shane's smile was triumphant. This was his moment of ultimate acceptance and trust. They reached the altar, and Pastor Williams began the traditional words. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" Shane stepped forward slightly. "Joan and I do, with great joy and blessing." The ceremony continued, but Marcus barely heard the vows or readings. His attention was focused on Shane, who stood with Joan in the front row, playing the role of beloved family patriarch. After the rings were exchanged and Luke kissed his bride, Shane was among the first to embrace the couple, accepting congratulations from other guests who now viewed him as Megan's stepfather. The receiving line formed, and Marcus found himself standing next to Shane as they greeted the exiting guests. "Beautiful ceremony," Shane said, his confidence fully restored. "Megan looks incredible. You must be very proud." "I am," Marcus replied evenly. Joan and I are so grateful for your flexibility about the arrangements. It means everything to have family unity on a day like this. Marcus studied Shane's face, the practiced sincerity, the calculated warmth. In a few minutes, this man's world would collapse completely. The guests moved to the reception venue, an elegant ballroom at the Riverside Country Club. The cocktail hour was already in full swing when Marcus made his entrance, the silver gift box tucked under his arm. He spotted Patricia and Lisa near the bar, dressed elegantly and blending seamlessly with the other guests. Sandra was at a table with several of Joan's friends, nodding sympathetically as someone discussed the challenges of modern dating. Shane was holding court near the wedding party table, regaling a group of men with a story about sailing in the Mediterranean. Joan stood beside him, glowing with happiness and pride in her sophisticated boyfriend. Marcus approached Luke, who was greeting guests with Megan. "Luke, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped away from the receiving area to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "This is it," Marcus said, handing over the gift box. "Everything we discussed is in here. I need you to open it when you're ready to act, not before." Luke took the box with trembling hands. "What exactly am I supposed to do with this?" "When you've seen what's inside, you'll know." "But Luke, once you open that box, there's no going back. This will change everything for everyone." Marcus returned to the cocktail reception, positioning himself where he could observe all the key players. Shane continued working the room with practiced ease, completely unaware that his past victims were scattered throughout the crowd, waiting for their moment of justice. The formal reception began with dinner and toasts. Marcus watched Shane's face during the father of the bride speech, noting how the man seemed to savor every moment of being included in this family celebration. It was time for the real wedding gift to be opened. Marcus caught Luke's eye across the room and nodded once. Luke excused himself from the head table and walked to the quiet corner where Marcus had left him earlier. With shaking hands, he opened the silver gift box. Through it all, Marcus kept his expression calm and pleasant, chatting with other guests while internally counting down the minutes until Shane McCarthy's carefully constructed world would finally crumble. Chapter 7. The Moment of Truth. Luke spent 15 minutes in private with the contents of Marcus's gift box. When he returned to the reception, his face was pale but determined. He whispered something to Megan, who looked confused but nodded, then approached the DJ booth. The music faded, and Luke took the microphone with shaking hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for a moment. Before we continue with the celebration, there's something important that needs to be addressed." Marcus felt his heart racing as conversations died and all eyes turned toward Luke. Shane, who had been chatting with Joan's friends, looked mildly puzzled but maintained his confident smile. "As many of you know, my new stepfather-in-law Shane McCarthy had the honor of walking my bride down the aisle today. It was a gesture that symbolized his acceptance into our family and his role in Megan's life." Shane's smile widened, clearly expecting public praise. Luke continued, his voice growing stronger. "However, I've just learned some information about Shane that I believe this family, and all of you, deserve to know." Now Shane's expression began to change. The confident smile flickered, replaced by something more guarded. "Shane, would you mind joining me up here?" The request was phrased politely, but the underlying command was clear. Shane hesitated, glancing toward the exits, but with 200 guests watching, he had no choice but to comply. He walked toward Luke with forced casualness, but Marcus could see the tension in his posture. "Thank you, Shane." Luke's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "I want to ask you about some friends of yours who are here tonight." Shane's face went completely still. Luke gestured toward Patricia, who stood up from her table near the bar. "This is Patricia from Phoenix." "Shane, don't you recognize your first wife?" The ballroom erupted in confused murmurs. Joan's face went white as she stared at Shane, who seemed frozen in place. "And this is Dr. Lisa McCarthy from Denver." Lisa stood up, her expression grim but determined. "Your second wife, Shane, the woman whose medical practice you destroyed." Shane finally found his voice. "I don't know what kind of sick joke this is, but—" "And Sandra," Luke interrupted, gesturing toward the woman who had been sitting with Joan's friends. "Your third wife from Seattle." The widow whose life insurance settlement you stole. Shane spun towards Sandra, his mask finally slipping completely. The charming, confident man was gone, replaced by something desperate and cornered. Marcus stepped forward, pulling out his phone. Luke, perhaps our guest would like to hear from Shane's previous wives directly. The tablet speakers filled the ballroom with Patricia's recorded voice. Shane McCarthy entered my life 2 years after my divorce, when I was vulnerable and struggling to rebuild. He was charming, attentive, everything I thought I needed. Within 6 months, he had convinced me to refinance my home and invest the equity in his business ventures. When I finally realized what was happening, he'd already transferred over $400,000 to accounts I couldn't access. He disappeared overnight, leaving me bankrupt. Joan sank in her chair, her face ashen. Megan looked between her mother and Shane in complete bewilderment. Lisa's voice followed. As a doctor, I thought I was smart enough to recognize a con artist. Shane spent 8 months convincing me that he was a successful businessman looking for someone to share his life with. He persuaded me to take out loans against my practice, to invest in opportunities that would secure our future together. He destroyed my career, my financial security, and my ability to trust anyone again. Shane made a move toward the exit, but Phil Zamora stepped into view, blocking his path. Other guests began standing, creating a human barrier around the increasingly frantic man. Sandra's recorded voice was the most damning. My husband was a forensic accountant who taught me to document everything. I have records of every transaction, every lie, every manipulation Shane used to steal my husband's life insurance settlement. He didn't just take my money. He violated the memory of my marriage and left me with nothing but debt and shame. The ballroom was completely silent now, except for the voices of Shane's victims. Joan stood up slowly, staring at the man she'd planned to marry. Joan, Shane said, his voice breaking slightly. You have to understand, this is all a misunderstanding. These women are obviously working together to what? Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through Shane's desperation. To prevent you from doing to Joan what you did to them. Marcus pulled out printed bank statements and handed them to Joan. These are copies of your joint investment account, Joan. The one Shane has been managing. Look at the withdrawals. Over $300,000 transferred to accounts under Shane's exclusive control. Joan's hands shook as she reviewed the documents. Shane, what is this? It's temporary. Those are legitimate business investments that will pay back double. Show them the house refinancing documents, Marcus said to Luke. Luke produced another set of papers. Joan, did you know that Shane has already arranged to refinance your house again? The equity you've built up over 20 years, it's being transferred to his private accounts. Shane's composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand any of this. Joan, we had plans, a future together. This is just jealousy. Marcus can't stand that you've found happiness with someone else. Joan looked at the bank statements, then at Sandra, Patricia, and Lisa, 3 women whose lives had been destroyed by the same charming man who had promised her a new beginning. How long? She asked quietly. What? How long have you been planning this? Was any of it real? Shane opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The practiced charm, the ready answers, the confident demeanor. It all crumbled in the face of undeniable evidence. Megan finally found her voice. Mom, I don't understand. What does this mean? Joan turned to her daughter, tears streaming down her face. It means that everything I thought I'd found with Shane was a lie. It means that your father... She looked at Marcus with an expression of profound gratitude and shame. Your father just saved us from financial ruin. Shane made one last desperate attempt. Joan, please, don't let them poison your mind against me. We love each other. But Joan was no longer looking at him. She was staring at Marcus with the realization of what he had done and what it must have cost him. You knew, she said softly. You knew all along, and you let me? You let me exclude you from the wedding. Let me give him your place with Megan, and you never said a word. Marcus met her eyes steadily. I said Megan's happiness was my priority. Protecting you protects her future. Shane tried once more to reach the exit, but Luke's groomsmen had quietly positioned themselves around the room. Phil Zamora stepped forward, pulling out his badge. Shane Patrick McCarthy, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Shane's last vestige of dignity disappeared entirely. This isn't over, he snarled at Marcus. You think you've won, but you've destroyed this family just as much as I have. Marcus looked at Megan, who was crying in Luke's arms, then at Joan, who was staring at the financial documents that revealed the scope of Shane's betrayal. No, Shane, Marcus said quietly. I've saved this family, and you'll never get the chance to hurt another woman again. Chapter 8. After the storm. The ballroom cleared slowly as guests processed what they had witnessed. Some left immediately, uncomfortable with the dramatic turn of events. Others lingered, offering support to Joan and Megan or expressing admiration for Marcus's courage in exposing Shane. Patricia, Lisa, and Sandra approached Joan together, 3 women united by their shared experience of Shane's deception. We're sorry this happened on your daughter's wedding day, Patricia said gently. But we couldn't let him do to you what he did to us. Joan wiped her tears and looked at each woman. How long did it take you to recover? I'm still recovering, Lisa admitted. Financially, emotionally. But seeing him arrested tonight, it's the first time in 3 years that I feel like justice might actually exist. Sandra handed Joan a business card. My husband's firm specializes in recovering assets from financial fraud. They might be able to help you get back some of what Shane stole. Joan nodded gratefully, but her attention was focused on Megan, who sat at the head table in her wedding dress, looking lost and confused. Marcus approached his daughter cautiously. Megan, I know this wasn't how you wanted your wedding day to end. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. Dad, I gave him your place. I chose him over you to walk me down the aisle, and all the time he was. You couldn't have known, Marcus said firmly, sitting beside her. Shane is a professional predator who spent months earning your trust and your mother's. The fact that you have a generous heart isn't something to be ashamed of. Luke joined them, still shaken but resolute. Mr. Fields, I owe you an apology. When you first told me about Shane, I thought you might be motivated by jealousy or bitterness about the divorce. I was wrong. You protected your bride and your new family, Marcus replied. That's exactly what a good husband should do. Megan stood up and hugged Marcus tightly. You gave up your place in my wedding to protect us. You let Shane take your honor, knowing what he really was, because you were building a case to stop him. She pulled back to look at him. That's not just good fathering. That's heroic. Joan approached them slowly, still clutching the financial documents that proved Shane's systematic theft. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you, or how to apologize for what I put you through. Joan, Shane manipulated your emotions and your trust. That's not your fault, but I chose him over you. I believed his lies about our marriage, about why we grew apart. Her voice broke. He was already in my life before our divorce was final, wasn't he? He targeted me specifically because I was married to a successful attorney. Marcus nodded. Phil's investigation suggests Shane researched you for months before making contact. He knew about our marriage, our finances, your emotional state. You were selected as his next victim. Joan sank into a chair, the full implications hitting her. So our divorce, the problems in our marriage, were real, Marcus said honestly. We had grown apart. We were both focused on work more than each other. Shane didn't create those problems, but he definitely exploited them. He positioned himself as everything you felt was missing from our relationship. The hotel manager appeared with several staff members. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have the ballroom reserved until midnight. Would you like us to continue with the reception, or would you prefer to conclude the evening? Megan and Luke looked at each other, then at the remaining guests, mostly close family and friends who had stayed to offer support. What do you think? Megan asked her new husband. Luke surprised everyone. I think we should celebrate. Shane McCarthy tried to destroy this family, but he failed. If anything, tonight proved how much we all love and protect each other. That seems worth celebrating. Marcus smiled, his first genuine smile of the entire day. Luke's right. Shane's gone. Joan's finances can be recovered, and we've all learned something about the importance of family trust. Plus, You two are still married, which was the point of today. The DJ, who had been waiting uncertainly in the corner, started the music again. Slowly, the remaining guests began to relax and return to celebration mode. Marcus danced with Megan for the traditional father-daughter dance, both of them emotional but happy. "Dad," she said as they swayed to the music, "I want you to know that you'll always be the most important man in my life. Luke's my husband, but you're my hero. Just remember that feeling when I'm a meddling grandfather someday." Marcus replied, making her laugh. Later, as the evening wound down, Joan approached Marcus one final time. "I know we can't undo the past 2 years, but I want you to know that what you did tonight reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place. You're a good man, Marcus Fields. I forgot that for a while, but I'll never forget it again." Marcus looked at his ex-wife, still beautiful, but now older and wiser from her experience with Shane. "We're different people than we were 20 years ago, Joan. Maybe too different to be married to each other. But we're still Megan's parents, and we'll always be connected by that." Joan nodded. "I like to think we could be friends again. Real friends, not just co-parents." "I like that too." As the reception finally ended and the family prepared to leave, Marcus reflected on the cost of his victory. He had saved Joan from financial ruin and protected Megan's inheritance, but the process had required him to orchestrate a public humiliation on his daughter's wedding day. Yet looking at his family, Megan secure in Luke's love, Joan free from Shane's manipulation, all of them united by the truth instead of divided by lies, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. Shane McCarthy's arrest would make headlines, his pattern of fraud would be exposed nationally, and his career as a predator would end permanently. More importantly, he would never again have the opportunity to destroy innocent families. Justice, Marcus had learned, sometimes required difficult choices and personal sacrifice. But protecting the people you loved was always worth the price. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 6 months after the wedding, Marcus sat in his office reviewing the final paperwork from Shane McCarthy's prosecution. The case had become a landmark fraud conviction, with Shane sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to all his victims. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been thorough in their investigation, uncovering additional victims in other states and recovering nearly $2 million in stolen assets. Patricia had been able to save her home, Lisa was rebuilding her medical practice, and Sandra had recovered most of her late husband's life insurance settlement. Joan had been fortunate. Quick action by forensic accountants had frozen Shane's accounts before he could transfer all her assets offshore. She recovered about 60% of what had been stolen, enough to maintain her financial security and avoid bankruptcy. More importantly, the experience had changed her perspective on relationships and trust. She'd started therapy to understand how she'd been manipulated and to ensure she would never again be vulnerable to such sophisticated emotional manipulation. Marcus's relationship with his daughter had grown stronger than ever. Megan called him regularly, seeking advice on everything from career decisions to marriage challenges. The shared experience of Shane's betrayal had created a bond of mutual respect and trust that hadn't existed before. Luke had proven himself to be exactly the kind of husband Marcus had hoped for, protective of Megan, supportive during the difficult months following Shane's arrest, and committed to building a strong marriage based on honesty and communication. A knock on his office door interrupted Marcus's thoughts. Dina announced that Joan was here to see him. "Send her in." Joan entered looking healthier and more confident than she had in years. The trauma of Shane's betrayal had been difficult, but the process of recovery had restored her sense of self-worth and independence. "I have news," she said, sitting across from his desk. "The restitution hearing is next week, and the prosecutor says we should recover another $30,000 from Shane's remaining assets." "That's excellent news. Marcus, I want to use part of that money for something specific." Joan leaned forward, her expression serious. "I want to fund a nonprofit organization that educates women about sophisticated romance scams. What Shane did to me, to Patricia and Lisa and Sandra, it happens to thousands of women every year." Marcus was impressed. "That's a meaningful way to use the experience. I was hoping you might consider serving on the board. Your legal expertise would be invaluable, And frankly, your willingness to act when everyone else was being manipulated is exactly the kind of clear thinking the organization would need. The request surprised him. Working closely with Joan again would require them to navigate their complicated history carefully, but the cause was important. "I'd be honored to help." Joan smiled, the first completely genuine smile Marcus had seen from her since before Shane entered their lives. "There's something else. Megan and Luke are expecting their first child." Marcus felt a surge of joy. "When?" "October. They wanted to tell you themselves, but I couldn't resist sharing the news." "You're going to be a grandfather, Marcus." The irony wasn't lost on him. Exactly 1 year after the wedding disaster, his family would welcome a new generation. Shane McCarthy's attempt to destroy their family had instead ultimately brought them closer together. "Have they chosen names?" "If it's a boy, they're considering Marcus as the middle name." Apparently, Luke said any son of his should be named after the grandfather who taught him what it means to protect your family. Marcus felt emotions he hadn't experienced in years: pride, joy, and a deep satisfaction that came from knowing his choices had been vindicated by their results. Later that evening, Marcus had dinner with Megan and Luke at their new home, a modest but comfortable place they'd purchased with careful financial planning and no debt. "Dad, we wanted to ask you something," Megan said as they finished dessert. "Would you be willing to be our baby's godfather?" "Luke, and I want someone who will teach our children about integrity and courage." Marcus looked around the table at his family, his daughter glowing with pregnancy and happiness, his son-in-law who had proven himself worthy of the title, the promise of a grandchild who would grow up in a family built on truth and trust. "There's nothing that would make me prouder," he said. As he drove home, Marcus reflected on the events that had brought them to this point. Shane McCarthy had entered their lives as a predator seeking to exploit their vulnerabilities and destroy their financial security. Instead, his presence had revealed the strength of their family bonds and the power of truth to overcome even sophisticated deception. The victory hadn't been easy or simple. It had required Marcus to risk everything: his relationship with his daughter, his ex-wife's trust, even his own reputation. But the alternative would have been watching his family destroyed by a man who had already ruined 3 other families. Justice had been served. Shane was in prison. His victims had recovered their assets, and his career as a predator had ended permanently. More importantly, Marcus's family was stronger, wiser, and more united than before. Marcus pulled into his apartment parking garage, thinking about the future. He had a grandchild to anticipate, a nonprofit organization to help establish, and a family that had learned the difference between charm and character. Shane McCarthy had been smart, sophisticated, and temporarily successful. But he had made one critical error. He had targeted a family protected by someone who understood that sometimes, to save the people you love, you have to be willing to be the villain in their story. Marcus had been willing to pay that price. And in the end, the truth had set them all free. The phone in his apartment was ringing as he entered. Megan's voice was excited. "Dad, I forgot to tell you, Luke felt the baby kick for the first time today. We're having dinner Sunday if you want to come over and maybe feel it too." "I'll be there," Marcus said, smiling as he looked out at the city lights. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Fields felt completely at peace with his life and his choices. He had protected his family, served justice, and earned a future where his grandchildren would grow up knowing the difference between manipulation and love. It had been worth every sacrifice.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.